Left to die in the void, until a human ship broke the endless silence. Yuna Lee woke up to the sound of nothing. Not the hum of life support. Not the distant thrum of engines. Not even the soft whisper of recycled air through the vents. Just, nothing. A silence so complete it pressed against her eardrums like a physical thing, making her wonder if she'd gone deaf during cryosleep. Her eyes opened to darkness. The panic came slowly at first, a gentle tickle of wrongness at the base of her skull. Then it roared through her veins like ice water when her hand fumbled for the emergency release and found it already triggered. The cryopod had opened itself. No crew standing by. No post-revival protocols. Just her, alone, in a dead ship floating through space. Lights, she croaked, her voice raw and unfamiliar. Nothing happened. Emergency illumination. Backup systems. Anything. Still nothing. Yuna dragged herself out of the pod, her legs threatening to buckle under her weight. 3 months in cryo always left you weak, but the station protocols required a medical team to help you through the first hour. She pressed her hand against the wall, feeling her way through the absolute darkness, counting steps to where the corridor should bend toward the bridge. 7 steps. 8. 9. Her boot hit something soft. She knelt carefully, fingers exploring, and found fabric. A uniform. Felkar design, the same species as Captain Vorsin and most of the crew aboard the Meridian Trade. But the body inside was cold. Not just dead cold. Frozen solid cold. That's when she noticed her breath misting in front of her face. The heating had been off for a long time. Yuna's engineering training kicked in, overriding the fear trying to claw up her throat. She pulled the small emergency beacon from the corpse's belt, standard issue for all crew, and activated it. The pale blue glow revealed a nightmare. Bodies everywhere. Frozen mid-step, mid-reach, mid-scream. The entire crew of the Meridian Trade, dead in the corridors. Her hands shook as she moved the light across their faces, looking for, she didn't know what. Answers. Explanations. Anything that made sense. She found it on the bridge. Captain Vorsin sat in his command chair, his 6-fingered hand still resting on the navigation console. The screen in front of him flickered with the last thing he'd been looking at before the cold took him, a star chart. And in the center of that chart, highlighted in warning red, was their current location. Void corridor, no navigation beacons, no rescue possible, avoid at all costs. Yuna's blood turned to ice for reasons that had nothing to do with temperature. The void corridor. The graveyard of the galaxy. A region of space where subspace currents ran wrong, where signals twisted back on themselves, where nothing, not even distress calls, could escape. Ships that entered the void corridor were never heard from again. It was the kind of place parents used to scare children into good behavior. And she was in the middle of it. The navigation log told the rest of the story. 3 months ago, right after Yuna had entered cryosleep, the Meridian Trade had encountered an ion storm. Captain Vorsin had made the call to divert through the edge of the void corridor, just the edge, he'd noted in his log. A calculated risk to save time and avoid the storm. But the currents had pulled them in deeper. By the time Vorsin realized what was happening, it was too late. The ship's main power was failing. Life support was dropping. The crew had maybe 3 days of emergency reserves. And then Yuna found the final log entry, recorded in the captain's calm, professional voice. Emergency Protocol 779 enacted. Cryopod 23, Human Liaison Lee, will remain in stasis. Human biology consumes 1.4 times standard resources per cycle. The rest of the crew requires those reserves to attempt exit from the corridor. This vessel may yet be salvaged. 1 life for 47 is acceptable mathematics. Apologies to Liaison Lee's family. Her service was adequate. Adequate. The word echoed in Yuna's head as she stared at the frozen corpse of the captain who'd chosen to let her die. He'd kept her in cryo while the rest of them tried to survive. Tried and failed. And she'd slept through it all, peaceful and unaware, while they froze to death in the dark. She should have felt grief. Horror. Despair. Instead, she felt rage. Pure, white-hot, burning rage that cut through the cold and the fear and the impossible situation like a blade. Acceptable mathematics, she whispered to Captain Vorsin's corpse. You left me alive because you thought I'd used too much oxygen trying to escape with you. So you kept me asleep while you all died anyway. She stood, her legs steadier now, purpose burning through her muscles. Well, guess what, Captain? Yuna's voice echoed through the frozen bridge. I'm a human engineer. We don't do acceptable mathematics. We do impossible. She had no power. No communications. No rescue coming. But she was awake. And humanity had never been good at accepting death quietly. Engineering hope from despair. The emergency beacon cast dancing shadows across the bridge as Yuna worked, her frozen fingers fumbling with tools she'd scavenged from the crew's bodies. Every breath came out as a white cloud. Every movement felt like dragging herself through mud. But she kept moving. Because stopping meant thinking. And thinking meant remembering that she was alone in the deadliest region of space with maybe 4 days of oxygen left. She'd spent the first hour taking inventory, forcing her engineer's brain to focus on problems with solutions instead of the crushing weight of her situation. The Meridian trade was a corpse, main power offline, engines dead, navigation systems fried. But corpses still had parts worth harvesting. The auxiliary battery bank had 17% charge remaining. Enough to power basic systems for maybe 72 hours if she was careful. The emergency oxygen recyclers were functional, but they needed power she didn't have to spare. Simple math, she could have lights and heat, or she could have breathable air. Not both. Yuna chose air. She'd freeze slowly instead of suffocating quickly. The communications array was completely dead, the subspace transmitter had burned itself out trying to punch through the void corridor's interference. That was the real death sentence. Even if she somehow survived until the ship drifted out of the corridor, a process that could take months or years, no one would find her. The Meridian trade wasn't scheduled to report in for another 2 weeks. By the time anyone noticed they were missing, she'd be another frozen corpse in a ghost ship. Unless she could send a signal. Yuna pulled up the technical specifications for the void corridor on her datapad, squinting at the screen in the dim glow of her beacon. The corridor's subspace distortions were legendary, a naturally occurring phenomenon that bent and trapped electromagnetic radiation in recursive loops. Signals sent into the corridor never came out. They just bounced back and forth, degrading until they dissolved into static. But never was a word engineers loved to challenge. She traced her finger across the data, following the mathematical models of the subspace currents. The distortions weren't uniform, they pulsed and shifted in complex patterns. Most of the corridor was impenetrable. But there, buried in the technical notes, was a footnote from a research team that had studied the phenomenon from the outside. Theoretical microcorridors of reduced interference detected at intervals of approximately 73-hour cycles. Window duration, 4 to 7 minutes. Signal escape probability, 0.003%. 0.003%. Yuna laughed, the sound harsh and bitter in the frozen air. I'll take it. She spent the next 12 hours building something that would have made her professors at the Seoul Engineering Academy weep. Cables ripped from the walls. Circuit boards cannibalized from every non-essential system. A transmitter cobbled together from the ship's emergency buoys, the captain's personal comm unit, and what looked like a coffee maker. The design was insane. She was routing power through systems that were never meant to work together, creating feedback loops that could theoretically amplify a signal by a factor of 50. It could also theoretically explode and kill her instantly. At this point, that might be a mercy. Yuna worked with numb fingers, her breath coming in short gasps as the oxygen levels slowly dropped. She welded connections with a handheld torch, praying each spark wouldn't ignite something critical. She rerouted the auxiliary battery to dump its entire charge into the transmitter in one massive burst. It would give her one shot. One single transmission before the battery died and the oxygen ran out and the cold claimed her like it had claimed the rest of the crew. She programmed the message in Korean first, her native language, the words of home. Then in English. Then in the clumsy galactic standard she'd learned for her liaison position. The message was simple. This is Liaison Yuna Lee of Earth, aboard the Meridian Trade. Coordinates follow. I am alive. I am in the void corridor. I have 4 days of air. If anyone receives this, if anyone is listening, please. I don't want to die alone in the dark. Yuna's hands shook as she keyed in her brother's emergency contact code. Miho. Her little brother who wasn't so little anymore, who'd cried when she'd accepted the liaison position on a deep space trade route. She added, tell Miho I fought. Tell him I didn't give up. The datapad showed 71 hours since she'd woken up. The theoretical window would open in 2 hours. Yuna sealed her makeshift environment suit, 3 layers of emergency thermal blankets duct taped together over her uniform, and settled into the captain's chair to wait. She was so tired. The cold made everything hurt. It would be easy to close her eyes, to let herself slip away before the oxygen ran out. But she was human. And humans were too stubborn to die easy. At the 73-hour mark, she activated her Frankenstein's monster of a transmitter. The Meridian Trade groaned as every last electron in the auxiliary battery surged through the improvised array. Lights flickered throughout the ship, the first real illumination in days. The transmitter screamed, pouring everything it had into a single desperate pulse of electromagnetic radiation. The ship went dark again. The temperature dropped another 5 degrees. And somewhere in the void corridor, where no signal should ever escape, Yuna's voice began its impossible journey through the dark. She didn't know if it worked. She'd never know. But 847 light-years away, on the bridge of a beaten-up human cargo hauler called the Unyielding Dawn, a communications officer's board suddenly lit up with an incoming transmission. And Captain Park Sun-ho heard 6 words in Korean that would change everything. I am alive. Please help me. When humanity hears the call. Captain Park Sun-ho was drinking terrible coffee when the impossible happened. The Unyielding Dawn wasn't much to look at, a frontier-class cargo hauler that had seen better decades, held together with spite, improvised repairs, and the kind of engineering that made safety inspectors weep. Her hull was a patchwork of mismatched plates. Her engines ran hot and loud. But she was human-built, human-crewed, and she'd never failed to bring her people home. Sun-ho liked her that way. Pretty ships attracted attention. The Dawn attracted nothing but pity. Captain. Communications Officer Chen's voice cut through the bridge's usual banter. I'm picking up something weird. Weird how? Sun-ho set down his coffee, immediately alert. In deep space, weird usually meant expensive or dangerous. Often both. Fragment of a transmission. Heavily degraded. It's. Chen's fingers flew across her console. It's in Korean, sir. The bridge went quiet. Korean wasn't unusual, humanity had spread across the stars, and the languages of Earth had spread with them. But they were 3 months out from any major human settlement, running a supply route to the mining colonies in the Xerxes cluster. They shouldn't be hearing anything in Korean out here except their own chatter. Play it, Sun-ho ordered. Static filled the bridge. Then, like a ghost emerging from electronic snow, a voice. Na Lee of Earth, aboard the Merid, and trade. Coordinates, low. I am alive. I am in the ID corridor. I have 4 days of. If anyone, Ives this, anyone is listening, please. I don't want to, alone in the dark. The silence that followed was absolute. Jesus Christ, whispered Engineer Kowalski from his station. Sunho was already moving. Chen, origin point. Now. Working on it, Captain. The signals bounced through half the sector. It's like it's been, she stopped, her face going pale. Sir. The transmission originated from inside the void corridor. That's impossible, said First Officer Ramos. Nothing gets out of the corridor. That's why they call it the corridor. I know what they call it. Chen's hands were shaking. But I'm telling you, this signal came from grid 447/Delta. That's 40 light-years inside the boundary zone. Sunho stared at the star chart that had appeared on the main screen. The void corridor stretched across it like a scar, a region of space colored in warning red, marked with skull symbols and cautionary text in 6 languages. The calculated origin point of the transmission sat in the middle of it like a drowning woman waving from the bottom of the ocean. She said 4 days, Sunho said quietly. How old is the transmission? Chen worked her console. Signal degradation suggests 18 hours, give or take. Captain, even if we burned our engines at maximum, we're 3 days out from the corridor boundary. And that's not even. I know. Sunho cut her off. He knew the math. Everyone on the bridge knew the math. 3 days to reach the edge of the corridor. Then they'd have to enter it, something no sane captain would ever do. Navigate through subspace distortions that had swallowed entire fleets. Find one ship in a region of space where sensors didn't work and navigation was pure guesswork. And do it all before a woman named Yuna Lee ran out of air. It was suicide. Play it again, Sunho said. Chen hesitated. Captain. Play it again. The ghost voice filled the bridge once more. Tell Miho I fought. Tell him I didn't give up. Sunho closed his eyes. Somewhere on Earth, or one of the colonies, or a station, someone named Miho had a sister. Had a sister who was dying alone in the dark, who jury-rigged a miracle just to send a message that probably shouldn't have been possible. Who was still fighting. Captain. Ramos stepped closer, his voice low. You know what you're thinking. Don't. Do I? The corridor is a death sentence. We'd be risking 47 lives for one person we've never met, who's probably already dead. Probably, Sunho agreed. We have cargo contracts. People depending on these supplies. We do. Entering the corridor violates every safety protocol Frontier Command has ever written. It does. Ramos waited. The bridge waited. Sunho turned to face his crew. His mismatched, patchwork crew of misfits and survivors, humans who'd all ended up on the unyielding Dawn because they didn't fit anywhere else. Chen, who'd lost her family to a reactor failure. Kowalski, who'd been blacklisted from the corporate fleets for speaking up about safety violations. Ramos, who'd turned down 3 promotions to stay aboard this rust bucket. They were looking at him. Waiting for the order that would either save a life or end theirs. My grandfather fought in the Korean War, Sunho said quietly. Earth War, way back in the 2050s, before humanity went to the stars. He used to tell me stories about the soldiers who went into enemy territory to bring back wounded comrades. Said it wasn't about tactics or strategy. It was about a promise, we don't leave our people behind. Ever. He pulled up the transmission data. This woman, Yuna Lee, she's one of ours. Human. She built a transmitter out of garbage that did something physicists say is impossible, just so she could send a message from a place where messages don't escape. She's still fighting. Still hoping that somewhere out there, someone gives a damn. Sunho's voice hardened. So here's the deal. I'm taking the Dawn into the void corridor. I'm going to find Yuna Lee, and I'm going to bring her home. Anyone who doesn't want to come can take an escape pod right now. I'll make sure Frontier Command knows you acted appropriately. No judgment. No consequences. Nobody moved. But if you stay, Sunho continued, you're agreeing to do something stupid, dangerous, and probably impossible. You're agreeing to risk everything for someone you've never met. Because that's what humans do. We don't calculate acceptable losses. We don't leave our people to die alone. He looked each of them in the eye. So. Who's with me? Kowalski spoke first, his accent thick with emotion. Hell, Captain. I came out here to fix impossible problems. Might as well fix this one. Chen wiped her eyes. I'll navigate. Don't care what the distortions do. We'll figure it out. One by one, every member of the bridge crew stepped forward. Ramos was last. He stood in front of Sunho for a long moment, then smiled grimly. You're insane. We're all insane. But. He extended his hand. Somebody's got to show these aliens what humans are made of. Sunho shook his hand, then turned to the helm. All hands, battle stations. Divert all non-essential power to engines. Chen, calculate us a burn that'll shave 6 hours off our ETA, I don't care if it melts the reactor casing. Aye, Captain. And someone send a message to Frontier Command. Tell them the unyielding Dawn is entering the Void Corridor on a rescue mission. Tell them. He paused, thinking of Yuna Lee, alone in the dark, waiting for a miracle. Tell them humanity heard the call. The Dawn banked hard, her engines flaring blue-white as she turned toward the deadliest region of space in the known galaxy. Behind them, the safe route to the mining colonies faded into the distance. Ahead, the Void Corridor waited. And somewhere in its depths, a woman who'd refused to die quietly was about to learn that when humanity promises never to leave anyone behind, they mean it.